Good morning and welcome to Political Brew. I'm News Center Maine's Don Kerrigan. We are joined again this week by our veteran analysts, Republican Phil Harriman, Democrat Ethan Strimling. Thanks for being here on this frigid weekend. A lot of sadness nationwide over the death of Tyree Nichols in Memphis and everything connected with that, and of course the larger picture of what is the role of government, state and national levels in responding to tragedies like this. Is there anything government can do, should do to reduce the chances of it? Phil, I'll start with you. Is there a government response that's needed?
There must be. We've seen too many instances like this where the public feels as though law enforcement is taking matters into their own hands, if I could describe it that way. Yeah. In this instance, all 5 officers, as I understand it, involved in this just heartbreaking death are all people of color. So this isn't a racist issue. I think this is more about a training issue, and the training should be consistent across federal and state guidelines.
Yeah. Ethan, do you see it that way?
Well, it's about institutional racism, and that's what we need to understand. When we talk about institutional racism, we talk about the racism of systems that can be perpetuated by anybody who's a member of that system, and that's some of the problem that we see within our police departments. And let's be clear, this was not a death, this was not unfortunate, this was a torture and a murder. And obviously it needs to be prosecuted to that extent, but police departments across the country need to start looking at what's going on. I agree with Phil, training, and we need to start right here at home. Let's not pretend we have plenty of reports in Maine where we're seeing increased incidents of people of color getting pulled over, racial profiling, and we need to make sure that it never gets to the place that it is right now. I remember the fight that we had just in the city of Portland when I was trying to get body cameras in place, and how much of a fight it was to simply get that. Thank goodness we now have them.
Right.
Those are the kind of policies.
In Memphis, in this incident, body cameras all over the place.
And that's why we know what happened. That's why those kind of policies, they should be statewide. At the federal level, which was your first question, they need to pass the George Floyd Act. This is the number one thing they need to do. This came into place after the torture and murder of George Floyd by a police department. Pass that act, that's a first step. Make police officers much more culpable in their crimes.
Yeah. Phil, will a step like that change this?
Oh, I think it must, and I suspect every police chief and other leader in law enforcement across the country is having that inward conversation of what do we need to do to change the culture so that we do not ever see one of these again.
Yeah, but it can be a long process too, right? It doesn't change overnight.
No, sure doesn't.
Hunter Biden, who has been criticized heavily for several years by Republicans primarily, is under investigation already by the FBI. He, through his lawyer, is now trying to fight back, going after Rudy Giuliani, Steve Bannon, and even the guy who owned the computer store that he took his laptop to. Is this, are we ever going to get to the bottom of this Hunter Biden situation? And Ethan, I'll ask you, does it matter?
It doesn't matter. I mean, that's the point, right? I mean, are we ever going to get to the bottom of it? There are so many conspiracy theories. There are so much that's flying around that has nothing to do with anything about making Americans' lives better. That's the point of what we're trying to do. This is taking a family member and trying to turn that into some bigger story than it actually is. And it's very unfortunate that Republicans have made this, they ran their election saying we want to deal with inflation in the economy. And so far, all we see them doing is passing resolutions saying they don't like socialism. Apparently, they don't like Social Security and Medicare. They want to investigate the border. They want to investigate Hunter Biden. Well, working families in America need them to focus on the economy.
But if there is wrongdoing, if there was wrongdoing, it needs to be brought out.
Sure, the FBI should deal with it. That's totally appropriate. But this is politics, right? This is because it's Joe Biden's son. That's the only reason this is getting any attention nationally. Yeah. There's nothing that implicates Joe Biden in this at all.
Phil?
I see it very, very differently. This is an instance where in the height of the campaign between Biden and Trump, we had 50 leaders in the intelligence community, some of them former CIA directors, saying this is Russian disinformation. Now Hunter is saying, yeah, that is my laptop, but the contents of my laptop shouldn't have been disseminated by these individuals you've mentioned. And in those, allegedly, I've not seen them, allegedly are ties to foreign governments that Hunter Biden and by osmosis his father may be connected to. So
how osmosis to his father? That is such a leap. Osmosis is not something that happens, that just happens, like osmosis is not real, right?
So the details
That's what trees do.
In the laptop lead one to conclude that the FBI, as you suggest, should do their job. Let them do their job.
Which they've been doing.
Right. Supposedly.
It continues, I guess, in that.
Yeah.
So a story that for the moment is clearly not going away. In Congress, the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, has removed a couple of Democrats from some of their committees. Most recently, Representative Omar from the House Foreign Relations Committee, saying that anti-Semitic comments from her in the past mean she shouldn't be on that committee. And Ethan, I'll start with you on this. Is this just typical politics? Responding to the Democrats taking Republicans off committees last time?
It's not typical politics. It's very unfortunate what's going on. This is ideological, right? They don't care about anti-Semitism. Kevin McCarthy has tweeted out attacking Jews who are financing campaigns. Donald Trump meets with Kanye, meets with Nick Fuentes. Republicans say nothing. They don't care about anti-Semitism. That's obvious. This is ideological. They've gone after her from the beginning. And let's be clear, he didn't take her off the committee. He put this to a vote of Congress to have them take her off the committee. It's really disgusting the way we are attacking one of the only Muslims.
Yet Democrats took Marjorie Taylor Greene and another representative, I believe, off committees in the last Congress.
Yes, they did for sure. And when the people that were taken off committees in the past were people who were threatening other members of Congress. Remember, AOC was threatened, her life threatened by another member. That member was taken off. So let's understand the difference between an ideological attack, which is what's going on against Ilhan Omar, versus somebody who actually threatens somebody physically with violence.
Phil.
This is another indication of what's happening to the institutions that make our country one of the most enviable civilizations in the history of the world. Literally. We used to have this mutual respect for the minority and majority party. The minority party got to name their preferences of who served on what committees. That got overturned, as you suggested, in the last Congress with Nancy Pelosi. Now Kevin McCarthy's doing it. And that has begun this debate we're having that is unraveling the institution that used to operate on mutual respect.
How do we get the two sides to put the guns and swords down and get past all this kind of behavior?
Well, this is the opportunity that Kevin McCarthy has in this Congress to demonstrate as the Republicans took control, right? They said no more omnibus budget bills. We're going to have up and down votes. They've got to conduct this session of Congress the way they came into it and prove to America that they're going to set a different tone going forward.
Yeah.
But let's be clear to your question. One of the ways that we avoid this is we avoid false equivalencies. When a member of Congress attacks another member of Congress, threatens her life, that's a very different situation. And Nancy Pelosi did not start. Members have been taken off of committees for 200 years in the United States of America for their behavior when they attack other members of Congress or something like that. So what Nancy Pelosi did was not out of the ordinary. This, unfortunately, is.
Things happening in Maine this week. The situation with the Democratic representative from Waldoboro, Representative Collmore, who's been indicted for forging names on clean elections material, continues. He has still, as of this recording, not resigned from the legislature, but late in the week, the Speaker of the House removed him from his committee assignments. Phil, I'll start with you. Obviously, we don't know what's happening in Representative Collmore's mind, but is the legislature at this point doing what it can?
I once again want to compliment the Speaker of the House, Speaker Talbot, who is doing what she can within the powers she has as the Speaker of the House to, in this case, deny him a committee assignment. And for doing that with someone in her own party is an act of what I would say statespersonship. Good for her.
Ethan, any inside baseball from the Democratic Party on this?
No, I know there's a lot of frustration and people would like it to go away. I think the same way that Republicans would like George Santos to go away, right? they would like this to go away. The member needs to step down as as Phil just said, Speaker Talbot Ross has done the right thing, taking the steps, saying he should resign, taking him off the committees. Maybe this could be referred to the Ethics Committee and they could take a look at it and begin to investigate further and make a determination. It's a big step to ask a legislature to get rid of one of its members, to take away the will of the people. Right. That's a very big step. But I think it's incumbent upon legislators to just have their own integrity around the issue, step down, deal with it. If he's innocent, he can run again. Yeah.
And another action this week involving potential legal charges over petition issues. The Attorney General's office is investigating a referendum petition from a couple years ago that was dealing with a referendum that did not make the ballot, but the petition was organized by incumbent Representative Billy Bob Fockingham, now the House Republican leader, and a national group. This whole thing with referendum petitions always seems to become, or often seems to become, very thorny. Ethan?
It does, and part of the problem is the paid circulators, right? These companies come in, they spend a lot of money, and Representative Fockingham, it appears, did not do a very good job of oversight in that campaign to make sure that the signatures, the people he was hiring, were on the up and up.
And I believe he said that he wasn't involved with it.
Yeah, he says he wasn't involved. We'll find out. Obviously, it was his campaign. He was the spokesperson for it. He has to have some responsibility. He was the leader of it, so he has to take some responsibility around that. But when you have these paid circulators coming in, it is unfortunately what happens. When you put money into the equation, people often try to break the rules to get more.
Right. Phil?
Well, the law couldn't be more clear as to how you're supposed to do this. And Representative Fockingham is claiming he's not responsible for it. That's going to have to be proven, as well as the Attorney General is going to have to discover who did authorize this behavior and take appropriate action.
So maybe, should we continue to allow paid petition circulators? That seems to pop up over and over again as part of a problem here. Should we continue to allow that?
Well, I as someone who's circulated petitions when I was in office, it's hard, grueling, sometimes a lot of rejection that goes along with it. So having someone compensated to do that, I don't, as a philosophical statement, have a problem with it. But when you pay someone $5 for every signature that's validated, that creates an incentive for perhaps some of the things that we're talking about this morning.
Right. And if you can use, I guess, an out-of-state company to manage it, or an in-state company.
Yeah, and they're paying them more than $5 a signature. That's part of the issue. But I'm with Phil on that. I mean, the issue is not that we are. It's that when you have that kind of incentive, you need to make sure that oversight is 2, 3, 4 times as strong, because where does the line? If I'm running a campaign and I have paid staff who are actually staff who go out and get signatures, is that somebody that shouldn't be able to get a signature because they happen to be the communications director? So you want to be a little bit careful around that, but the big thing is oversight. And if you're running these campaigns, I mean, this campaign didn't even get enough signatures. This was about as failed a campaign. It was a terrible issue, trying to stop people from being able to vote. And it was one that didn't even get the signatures.
Well, it was seeking to prevent non-citizens from voting.
As I said, prevent people from being able to vote. I'm not going to differentiate one human from another human, but stopping people from being able to vote. They didn't even get the signatures to do that, and they're now possibly going to be indicted for fraud.
Yeah. So more to come on that. As all these things, more to come. Yeah. Speaking of which, 2 reports from the Maine Public Advocate done by consultants going to the legislature about the issue of high electricity prices in Maine, saying basically that the system we have of the standard offer electric rate, originally designed to save consumers money, isn't doing that. And this is all going to land in the laps of the legislature and see if they may support ideas for coming up for a different way. Electricity prices in particular have gone through the roof the last couple of years, and everybody's concerned about it. So do you think, Phil, does the legislature have the wherewithal to make a change?
Yeah, I'm very proud to say to the viewers of Political Brew, I am the only legislator that voted against electric deregulation.
This was about 100 years ago. I want to be pre-dinosaurs, I think.
It's turned into re-regulation, and that's really what we're talking about again, is that we're going to have some study pushed forward to the Utilities and Energy Committee to decide whether or not we're going to re-regulate electricity. But one thing I think viewers need to be very clear on is that the cost of the electricity that gets delivered to your home is very different than what you pay Central Maine Power or Versant for the poles and wires.
Even though it's on the same bill.
Right.
But they're not to blame.
No.
Ethan, Do you think the legislature can come up with something?
Sure, I think we need to go to a consumer-owned utility and get rid of all this
There is that.
because then we would actually have control over the system and we wouldn't be having to.
But that wouldn't affect electric rates.
Well, but it would affect electric rates at some level because you would be no longer sending any profits to Spain. It all would be staying home, right? Your rates would probably reduce by 50%.
But that's not the cost of electricity.
Well, okay, your overall electric bill, your overall heat is going to come down, right? Yes, I understand there's the distribution side and all that, but what we're talking about is your overall rates that we need to look at. Look, Phil knows this issue inside and out, and I commend him for his vote that he took all those years ago. And it's true, the legislature does need to step in, but I think the biggest issue that we're seeing here is, you know, the profit motives behind electric companies that are pushing up rates is really the problem, and a consumer-owned utility will get us out of that.
All right, winners and losers of the week. Ethan, we'll start with you.
I'll start with the loser of the week. A legislator has proposed to allow teachers to have guns in schools. That is absolutely the wrong direction for us to go. The winners of the week, I want to thank all of the essential workers out there who are in our warming centers taking care of our most vulnerable people this weekend. These are very tough days on the homeless and our elderly, so thank you to them. They are our winners of the week.
All right, Phil.
My loser of the week is the continuing growing statistics of drug overdoses in our state. This is a crisis that needs to be addressed. My winner, I'll agree with Ethan on his winner, and mine is also Barbara Ward from Falmouth, who had the courage to stand up and speak up and engage in a pretty spirited discussion over diversity, equity, and inclusion. Good for her.
Terrific. Thank you both very much. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week with more Political Brew.